The signal came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Dr. Veltar Quinn pressed his scaled fingers against the observation deck's cool metal, watching the endless stars beyond. The Zephyrian Coalition's largest research station floated in the darkness between galaxies, its sensors reaching into the deepest corners of space. For 300 years they had listened to the universe's whispers. Today the universe was screaming. "Doctor, you need to see this," called Technician Mora from across the vast chamber. Her voice carried a tremor that made Veltar's 4 hearts skip in unison. In all his years studying dead civilizations, he had never heard fear quite like that in a colleague's voice. The main display showed waves of energy that shouldn't exist. They pulsed through space itself, carrying information encoded in patterns too complex for their best computers to understand completely. But what they could understand made no sense at all. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Veltar asked, his long neck craning to get a better view of the readings. "That's the problem, sir. According to our deep space sensors, this signal has been transmitting for approximately 50,000 years. Maybe longer. But we're only detecting it now because—" Mora paused, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "Because it's getting stronger." Veltar felt a chill run through his scaled skin. Signals didn't get stronger after 50,000 years. They faded, scattered, died. They became whispers lost in cosmic noise. They didn't grow into something that could reach across the galaxy with perfect clarity. "Where's it coming from?" he asked. "That's the other problem," Mora said, switching the display to show a star map. A red line traced from their position to a point far on the galactic rim. "The coordinates don't match any known star system. According to our records, that area of space is empty. Dead. Has been for millions of years." Veltar studied the map with growing unease. The Zephyrian Coalition had mapped every corner of their galaxy. They knew where life flourished and where it had died. They knew the locations of ancient battlefields and the graves of extinct species. But this signal came from a place that their ancestors had marked as lifeless since the beginning of recorded history. "Assemble the xenoarchaeology team," Veltar ordered. "Full analysis. I want to know what we're looking at." Over the following weeks, the research station became a hive of frantic activity. Scientists from 12 different coalition species worked around the clock, each bringing their unique perspectives to the mystery. The insectoid Krilch analyzed the mathematical patterns. The energy-based luminary studied the signal's interaction with cosmic radiation. The synthetic minds of the construct collective processed data at speeds that would have melted organic brains. What they found changed everything. The signal wasn't just broadcasting random information. It was telling a story. More than that, it was telling the story of a species that the Coalition had never encountered, never heard of, never imagined could exist. They called themselves humans. "Look at this," said Dr. Zafani, a floating crystal being whose thoughts manifested as colored light. Her crystalline body pulsed with excitement and horror as she shared her findings. "The data contains historical records, genetic information, cultural archives, and something else. Something I can't quite identify." The main display filled with images decoded from the signal. Bipedal creatures with soft skin and small eyes. They lived on a blue world orbiting a yellow star, in a system they called Sol. But these weren't the images that made the research team fall silent. Those images came later in the data stream. Humans in armor that gleamed like stars. Fighting creatures made of living shadow. Humans building ships the size of moons. Their surfaces covered in weapons that could crack planets. Humans standing in the ruins of their own cities, defiant even as the sky burned above them. "They were warriors," whispered Dr. Kestai, a peaceful scholar whose people had never known war. "But not just warriors. Look at this." More images flowed across the screens. Humans creating art from light itself. Humans building gardens in the vacuum of space. Humans teaching their children to read by the glow of artificial suns. They were destroyers and creators, killers and healers, all wrapped up in one impossible species. But it was the final section of the transmission that made Veltar's blood run cold. "They're extinct," announced Dr. Morgath, the team's specialist in dead languages. His mechanical voice carried no emotion, but his optical sensors flickered with something that might have been sadness. The last entries in their historical record speak of something called the final choice. They faced an enemy they couldn't defeat, so they chose to become something else entirely. "What kind of enemy?" Veltar asked, though part of him didn't want to know. The answer came in the form of redacted data files and corrupted recordings. Whatever the humans had fought, they had tried very hard to prevent anyone else from learning about it. But fragments remained, hidden in the deeper layers of the transmission, references to something called the Silence, a force that didn't just destroy civilizations but erased them from existence entirely. Planets, stars, entire sectors of space consumed and forgotten, as if they had never been. "Sir?" Mora called from her station, voice tight with panic. "I'm detecting something else in the signal, hidden beneath the historical data." "What kind of something?" "Coordinates. Dozens of them. They form a trail leading from the edge of our galaxy toward the signal's point of origin. And sir, each coordinate corresponds to a location our deep space probes have marked as containing unusual gravitational anomalies." Veltar felt all four of his hearts stop beating for a moment. The Coalition had indeed detected strange readings from those areas of space, structures that were too large to be natural, too old to be from any known civilization. They had cataloged them as curiosities, ancient debris from some long-dead species. Now it seemed they might be something else entirely. "Are you saying the humans left us a trail to follow?" he asked. "I'm saying they left everyone a trail to follow," Mora replied. "This signal isn't just broadcasting toward our galaxy. It's omnidirectional. Anyone with advanced enough technology to detect it would find the same coordinates, the same trail, the same story." The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. This wasn't just a historical record or a cry for help from a dying species. It was something far more purposeful, far more planned. The humans had known they were going extinct. They had prepared for it, and they had left behind a message designed to be found by whoever came after them. But why? Dr. Zefani's crystalline form pulsed with urgent light patterns. "Doctor, I've found something else in the deeper layers of the transmission. It's encrypted, but I think I can decode it." "Do it." The main display flickered and changed. New text appeared, written in the human language but somehow perfectly understandable to every species in the room. The translation wasn't coming from their computers. It was coming from the signal itself, adapting to each reader's mind. "To those who find this message, we were the humans of Earth. We lived, we loved. We fought, we died. But before we died, we made a choice. The enemy we faced could not be destroyed, only contained. So we became its prison. We became its guards. We became something more than what we were, so that you could remain what you are. This is our gift to the universe. This is our final song, but it is not the end of our story. Follow the coordinates. Learn who we were. Discover what we became. And if the time comes when the prison weakens, when the guards grow weary, remember this. There is always a choice. There is always hope. There is always a way forward, even when all seems lost. The stars are vast, but courage is vaster. We have shown you the path. Now you must choose whether to walk it." The research chamber fell completely silent. 12 different species, hundreds of brilliant minds, all united in stunned disbelief. The humans hadn't just died fighting some ancient evil. They had won by becoming something beyond death itself. Eternal guardians keeping the universe safe from a threat none of them had ever imagined. "Sir," Mora said quietly, "what do we do now?" Veltar looked at the star map again, at the red line leading from their safe, comfortable research station toward the unknown. The humans had faced the impossible and found a way through. They had given up everything to protect species they would never meet, worlds they would never see. The Coalition had spent centuries cataloging the dead, studying the failures of civilizations that couldn't survive the challenges of existence. They had grown comfortable in their role as cosmic archaeologists, content to learn from the mistakes of others rather than risk making their own. But the humans had left them more than just a historical record. They had left them a choice. "We follow the trail," Veltar said finally. "We learn their story. We discover what they became and why they did it." "And if we don't like what we find?" asked Dr. Kestai. "Then we'll face that choice when we come to it," Veltar replied. "The same way they did." As the research station began preparing for the first expedition along the human trail, the signal continued its endless broadcast. 50,000 years of faithful transmission, carrying the same message across the void. We were here. We fought, we chose, we endure. And now, for the first time since Earth fell silent, someone was finally listening. The stars watched in their ancient silence as the Zephyrian Coalition took its first steps along a path carved by extinct heroes. None of them could know that this was exactly what the humans had hoped would happen. None of them suspected that their journey was being guided by minds that had transcended death itself. The message in the void had found its audience at last. The first monument waited at the edge of the Helix Nebula, exactly where the human coordinates had promised it would be. Captain Yarthok gripped the command rail of the Coalition exploration vessel Distant Shore as the massive structure filled their view screen. In his 40 years of deep space exploration, he had seen the ruins of 1,000 dead civilizations. None of them had prepared him for this. Distance? He asked his navigation officer. Approximately 2,000 kilometers at the widest point, came the reply. But Captain, the scanner readings don't make sense. The structure appears to be a single piece, carved from some kind of crystallized metal we can't identify. No joints, no welds, no construction seams anywhere. The monument rose from the darkness like a mountain made of light. Its surface caught and reflected starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive, creating shifting designs that hurt to look at directly. Along its sides, massive carved figures told a story in stone and metal, each scene flowing into the next in an endless narrative spiral. Dr. Veltar floated beside the captain in his environmental suit, all four of his hearts beating fast with excitement. "Take us closer. I want to see those carvings." As they approached, the details became clearer and more disturbing. The carved figures showed humans in various scenes of daily life, but not the peaceful existence the Coalition had imagined for most species. These humans were always in motion, always building, always fighting, always reaching for something just beyond their grasp. "There," Veltar pointed with one clawed finger. "Do you see that section? The humans are fighting something, but the enemy is carved from different stone, darker stone." The ship's advanced scanners focused on the indicated area. The darker stone wasn't just a different material. It seemed to absorb light, creating sections of the monument that appeared to exist in permanent shadow. The human figures surrounding these dark areas were carved in poses of desperate courage, weapons raised against enemies that seemed to be made of living darkness. "Captain," called Science Officer Lindra from her station, "I'm detecting an energy signature from the monument's interior. Something is still active in there after all this time." "Active how?" Yarthok asked, his tentacles tightening around the command rail. "Unknown, but the energy patterns are similar to what we detected in the original signal. I think this monument is more than just a memorial. It's some kind of data repository." They found the entrance on the monument's base carved in the shape of an open hand. The moment their shuttle touched down, the hand began to glow with soft light, and a section of the wall simply faded away like mist. The interior defied all logic. Despite the monument's obvious age, everything inside looked new, clean, perfectly preserved. Corridors stretched in directions that shouldn't have been possible, given the structure's exterior dimensions. The walls were covered in moving pictures that showed scenes from human history, but not the sanitized version most species kept of their past. These images showed the truth. Humans dying in wars that consumed entire star systems. Humans sacrificing themselves to save worlds they had never visited. Humans making impossible choices and living with the consequences. But more than that, they showed humans learning from every failure, growing stronger with every loss, refusing to give up even when extinction stared them in the face. "Look at this," Dr. Veltar called from deeper in the monument. The others hurried to join him in a vast chamber where holographic displays showed tactical information that made their military experts pale. The humans had fought enemies that defied description, creatures that existed in dimensions beyond normal space, machine intelligences that could consume entire galaxies for raw materials, parasites that turned civilizations against themselves from within, and in every case the humans had found a way to win, not through superior technology, though their weapons were impressive enough. Not through greater numbers, for they seemed to be one of the smaller galactic powers. They won through something the Coalition had never seen before, a refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. "Here's a tactical report from something called the Void War," announced Dr. Morgeth, his mechanical voice processing data at inhuman speeds. The enemy had consumed 47 star systems and was approaching human space. The humans' response was to evacuate their entire population to the outer rim, then use their own sun as a weapon. The holographic display showed the Sol system in its final moments, human ships fleeing as their home star underwent controlled collapse. its death throes channeled through massive constructs into a directed energy beam that sterilized the approaching enemy fleet. Billions of humans made homeless by their own choice, but the threat was stopped. They destroyed their own sun to save others, whispered Captain Yarthok. What kind of species does that? The kind that understands the real cost of victory, said a new voice. Everyone in the chamber spun around. Standing in the entrance was a figure that shouldn't have been there. It looked human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with eyes that held depths no living creature should possess. When it moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around its edges. Who are you? Feltar demanded, though his scientific mind was already providing unwelcome answers. I am what remains of Commander Sarah Chen, 3rd Human Deep Fleet, the figure replied. Its voice carried harmonics that spoke directly to their minds rather than their ears. I died 14,000 years ago, but death is not the end for those who choose to guard the darkness. The coalition team stood frozen, caught between wonder and terror. First contact with an extinct species was supposed to be impossible. Dead civilizations didn't send representatives to meet with archaeologists. You're human? Captain Yarthok managed to ask. I was human. Now I am something else. Something necessary. The figure moved closer, and they could see that it wasn't quite solid. Light passed through it in strange ways, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. We left these monuments for species like yours, warnings, instructions, gifts. Gifts? Veltar asked. The knowledge that impossible things can be accomplished if you're willing to pay the price. Follow us through the monuments and we'll teach you what we learned. How to fight enemies that exist beyond physical law. How to make choices that will haunt you forever but save the universe. How to become more than what you were born to be. The holographic displays around them changed, showing new images. Other species, ones the Coalition had never seen before, standing alongside humans in the final battles. Not just fighting together, but changed by the experience. Made stronger, braver, more creative in their desperation. We did not fight alone in the end, Sarah Chen's ghost explained. Others joined us. Others chose to pay the price. The monuments will show you their stories too if you have the courage to keep following the trail. What happened to them? Dr. Morgeth asked with mechanical precision. They became what they needed to become. Some transcended physical existence like we did. Others found different paths. But all of them discovered the same truth. There is always a choice even when all choices seem impossible. Captain Yarthok looked at his crew, seeing his own confusion reflected in their alien faces. This wasn't what they had expected to find. Archaeological expeditions were supposed to uncover dead ruins and forgotten history, not encounter the ghosts of extinct heroes offering to teach them how to fight cosmic horrors. Why us? He asked. Why the Coalition? Because you listened, Sarah replied simply. Because when you found our message, you chose to follow it instead of filing it away as a curiosity. Because you have the potential to become what the universe needs you to become. And what's that? The next guardians. The next heroes. The next species to discover that courage is more powerful than physics, that hope is stronger than entropy, that love can transcend death itself. The ghostly figure began to fade, but her voice remained clear. Continue following the coordinates. Each monument will teach you something new. Each lesson will prepare you for what's coming. Because it is coming, whether you're ready or not. The silence stirs in its prison. The barriers weaken. Soon, very soon, the universe will need new champions. Wait, Veltar called out. What is the silence? How do we fight something we don't understand? Understanding comes with experience. Sarah's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Follow the trail. Learn our history. Discover what you're capable of. And remember, we chose this fate willingly because the alternative was unthinkable. You'll face the same choice eventually. When that time comes, remember what you learned here. The presence faded completely, leaving the Coalition team alone with the monument's displays. But the images had changed again, now showing a map of the galaxy with dozens of marked locations. More monuments, more lessons, more pieces of the puzzle. Captain, Lindra said quietly, long-range sensors are detecting similar structures at several of the coordinates shown on this map. The humans built a trail of monuments leading all the way to their point of origin. How many? Yarthok asked. 47 confirmed. Possibly more. Veltar studied the galactic map with growing awe and dread. 47 monuments, each one presumably containing its own lessons and warnings. The humans hadn't just left behind a historical record. They had created a vast educational system, a curriculum designed to transform whoever found it into something capable of standing against the ultimate darkness. Set course for the next coordinates, the captain ordered. We're going to see this through to the end. As the distant shore departed the monument, its sensors detected something that would have been impossible to notice from the inside. The entire structure was slowly rotating, its carved surface creating different patterns as it turned. From a distance, those patterns formed letters in the ancient human language. They spelled out a single word, repeated over and over in a spiral that wrapped around the monument's entire height. Remember. Behind them, the monument continued its eternal vigil, waiting for the next curious species to discover its secrets. And in the depths of space, 46 other monuments did the same, each one a stepping stone on a path toward a destiny that would transform the galaxy forever. The humans were gone, but their greatest lesson remained. That extinction was just another challenge to overcome, another impossible obstacle to turn into a tool for victory. Death was not the end for those with the will to continue fighting. The trail stretched on through the darkness, leading toward truths that would change everything. The ruins of Sol System spread before them like a graveyard of gods. Fleet Admiral Nexara stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Unity's Promise, leading the largest exploration fleet in their species' history. 47 monuments had led them here, each one teaching lessons that had changed how every member of the fleet thought about courage, sacrifice, and the price of victory. Now they floated at the edge of what had once been humanity's home, staring at the aftermath of a choice no sane species should have had to make. Where Earth should have been, a ring of crystallized debris orbited a star that burned with unnatural colors. The other planets were gone entirely, their matter converted into massive geometric structures that defied easy description. Space itself seemed twisted here, folded in ways that made navigators dizzy and caused their most advanced sensors to give contradictory readings. Tactical analysis, Nexara ordered, her chitinous shell clicking with nervous energy. The structures appear to be some kind of containment system, reported Science Commander Telvar, his tentacles dancing across holographic displays. They're generating fields that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The energy readings are significant. How significant? Each structure is outputting more power than our entire homeworld consumes in a century, and they've been operating at this level for approximately 50,000 years without any apparent power source. Dr. Veltar, now promoted to chief xenoarchaeologist for the expedition, floated forward in his mobility unit. The months of following the human trail had aged him visibly, but his eyes burned with the intensity of someone who had seen wonders and horrors in equal measure. There, he pointed to a structure near what had been Mars' orbit. That one's different. It's designed to be entered. The structure in question was beautiful and terrible to behold. It rose from the twisted space around it like a cathedral made of crystallized time, its walls shifting between solid matter and pure energy. Along its surface, familiar human figures were carved in poses that spoke of determination in the face of absolute doom. As their shuttle approached the structure, every member of the boarding party felt a presence touch their minds. Not intrusive, not threatening, but unmistakably there. A gentle contact that seemed to ask, "Are you ready to know the truth?" The entrance dilated open before they could answer, revealing a corridor that stretched impossibly far into the distance. The walls were lined with what appeared to be windows, but instead of showing the outside, they displayed scenes from across space and time. Past, present, and possible futures all existed simultaneously in these glimpses into reality's deeper layers. "Welcome to the Archive of Final Things," said a familiar voice. Sarah Chen materialized before them, but she was different now. Less human-shaped, more a collection of light and memory given form. Around her, other figures flickered in and out of existence. Humans, but also members of species the Coalition had never seen before. All of them had the same quality of existing beyond normal reality. "You followed our trail to its end," Sarah continued, her voice carrying harmonics of sorrow and pride. "You've learned our lessons, faced our tests, proven yourselves worthy of the truth. Now you must decide if you're strong enough to bear it." "We're ready," Admiral Nexara replied, though her voice carried uncertainty. "Are you? The truth we offer comes with responsibility. Once you know what we know, you cannot unknow it. Once you see what we've seen, you cannot close your eyes. Once you understand why we made our choice, you may find yourself faced with the same decision. Dr. Veltar stepped forward, his aged form trembling with determination. We've come this far. We've changed this much. Show us. The archive responded to his words. The walls around them became transparent, revealing the truth that lay at the heart of all reality. And in that moment, every member of the Coalition expedition understood why the humans had called their enemy the Silence. It wasn't a creature or a force in any conventional sense. It was the absence of everything. Not darkness, for darkness at least existed. This was the space between spaces, the void between thoughts, the gap where reality stopped being real. It consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself. Worlds touched by the Silence didn't just die. They ceased to ever have been. We first encountered it 47,000 years ago, Sarah explained as the archive showed them scenes of humanity's final war. It had already consumed 3 nearby galaxies, not destroyed them, erased them, made it so they never existed in the first place. Only a few scattered survivors escaped to tell the tale, and even they slowly forgot what they had lost. The images showed human fleets engaging an enemy that couldn't be properly seen or understood. Ships vanished not in explosions but in simple absence, as if they had been deleted from reality's code. Entire star systems blinked out of existence, taking their histories with them. We fought it for 3,000 years, Sarah continued. We threw everything we had at it. Our greatest weapons, our most brilliant strategies, our most advanced technologies. Nothing worked. You cannot destroy something that exists in the spaces between existence. You cannot defeat an enemy that erases the memory of its own victories. Then how did you stop it? Asked Telvar, his analytical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. We didn't stop it. We became its prison. The archive's displays changed, showing the final phase of humanity's war. But this wasn't a conventional military operation. Instead, it showed something that defied everything the Coalition understood about life, death, and the nature of reality itself. Project Eternal Vigil, Sarah said, her form flickering with memories of ancient pain. Our scientists discovered that the Silence couldn't consume what didn't exist in normal reality. So we chose to stop existing normally. Every human who ever lived, who had ever died, who would ever be born. We pulled all of us out of linear time and space, transformed ourselves into a distributed consciousness that exists in the gaps between dimensions. The horror of it hit the Coalition team like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just sacrificed their lives. They had sacrificed their existence itself, turning their entire species into a living seal around an entity that consumed reality. You became its guards, Dr. Veltar whispered. We became its cage, Sarah corrected. Every human consciousness now forms part of the barrier that keeps the Silence contained. We exist in the spaces it cannot touch, constantly vigilant, always ready to reinforce the seal where it grows weak. We gave up life, death, peace, rest, everything that makes existence meaningful, to ensure that you and billions of other species could continue to exist meaningfully. 50,000 years? Time doesn't mean the same thing when you exist outside of it, Sarah replied. To us, it's been both an instant and an eternity. We experience all moments simultaneously now. The moment we made the choice, the moment the seal was completed, this moment right now when we explain it to you. All of it happens at once. Why? The question came from Communications Officer Yildren, the youngest member of their crew. Why sacrifice everything for species you'd never met, worlds you'd never see? Sarah's form solidified, becoming more human for a moment. When she smiled, it carried all the warmth and sadness of a species that had given up everything out of love. Because it was the right thing to do, because someone had to, because the universe is vast and beautiful and full of wonders we wanted to preserve, even if we could never experience them again, because we learned that true victory isn't about winning. It's about ensuring that the things worth protecting continue to exist. But you didn't just contain it, Telvar observed, his scientific training helping him see patterns in the archive's data streams. You've been guiding galactic development, nudging species toward advancement, preventing catastrophic wars, preparing civilization for something. We have, because the Silence isn't completely contained. It never was. The seal holds, but it requires constant maintenance. Every few millennia, it tests our barriers. Every few million years, it finds new ways to weaken them. And eventually, inevitably, our strength will fail. The admission fell on the Coalition team like a death sentence. Everything they had learned, All the hope they had found in humanity's example suddenly seemed hollow. "How long?" Admiral Nexara asked. "In your terms of linear time? Perhaps 1,000 years. Perhaps 10,000. The mathematics are complex when dealing with multidimensional entities, but the outcome is certain. Eventually we will need help. Eventually the universe will need new guardians. Is that why you led us here? To recruit us as replacement guards?" "Not replacements," Sarah said firmly. "Partners. We've learned much during our vigil, but we've also lost much. We remember how to sacrifice, but we've forgotten how to hope. We remember duty, but we've lost touch with joy. You still possess what we gave up. Together we might find a solution we couldn't discover alone." The archive began displaying new information. Technical specifications for technologies beyond anything the Coalition had imagined. Methods for existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Techniques for manipulating the fundamental forces that held reality together. "This is our gift to you," Sarah explained. "Not just knowledge, but choice. You can take these technologies and use them to make your civilization stronger, safer, more capable of defending themselves. You can become the next generation of galactic guardians, standing watch over dangers that exist beyond normal understanding. Or you can walk away, return to your comfortable lives, and hope that our seal holds until the heat death of the universe." Dr. Veltar stared at the flowing information, his scientific mind reeling at the implications. With these technologies, the Coalition could transcend their physical limitations, explore realms of existence they had never dreamed of, become something truly cosmic in scope. But they could also lose themselves in the process, sacrifice their essential nature for power beyond imagining. "What did the other species choose?" he asked. "The ones we saw in the monuments. What happened to them?" "Each found their own path," Sarah replied. "The Eternal Builders chose to create new realities, crafting pocket universes where threatened species could find sanctuary. The Dream Weavers learned to exist in the collective unconscious of all sentient life, guiding civilizations through their shared myths and stories. The Time Walkers spread themselves across past and future, ensuring that critical moments in history unfolded properly. And they're all still out there? Still helping? In their own ways. The universe is vast and it needs many different kinds of guardians. We showed each species the truth, gave them the tools they needed, and let them choose their own destiny." Admiral Nexara looked at her crew, seeing the weight of impossible decisions settling on their shoulders. They had come seeking archaeological knowledge. Instead, they had found themselves faced with a choice that would define not just their own futures, but the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "As long as you need," Sarah replied. "The seal holds for now. The silence sleeps fitfully, but it sleeps. Take this knowledge back to your people. Show them what we've shown you. Let your entire civilization choose with full understanding of what's at stake." As the Coalition team prepared to leave the archive, Sarah's form flickered with something that might have been hope. "Remember," she said, "we chose our fate willingly because we saw no other way. But you have advantages we didn't have. You have our experience to learn from. You have technologies we developed through trial and error. Most importantly, you have each other. You don't have to face this alone." The shuttle departed the archive, carrying with it information that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the twisted structures of Sol System continued their eternal watch, housing the consciousness of an entire species transformed into something beyond mortal understanding. In the depths of their multi-dimensional prison, the silence stirred, testing barriers that had held for 50,000 years. And in response, 10 billion human souls pressed back, their combined will holding the line between existence and oblivion. The choice Sarah Chen had spoken of was coming. Soon, very soon, the universe would discover whether hope and courage could find a better solution than sacrifice and duty. The answer would determine whether the galaxy continued to exist, or simply faded away into the silence as if it had never been at all. The changes began 3 months after the Coalition fleet returned from Sol System. At first, they were subtle things that could be easily dismissed. Engineers across 12 worlds began having dreams about technologies that shouldn't exist. Mathematicians woke up with solutions to problems they'd never studied. Artists found themselves creating works that seemed to channel emotions from another species entirely. Most dismissed these experiences as stress, imagination, or simple coincidence. Dr. Veltar knew better. He stood in his laboratory on the Coalition's capital world, surrounded by artifacts that defied every law of physics his people had discovered. Technologies pulled from the human archive, devices that seemed to respond to thought as much as manipulation. Tools that worked despite having no power source his instruments could detect. But it wasn't the artifacts that worried him. It was the fact that he understood how to use them. Status report, he said to the crystalline data core he had activated 3 weeks ago. The device pulsed with inner light and responded with information that appeared directly in his mind, rather than through any external display. The core's response was as disturbing as he had expected. Coalition scientists across the galaxy were reporting similar experiences, sudden insights into quantum mechanics they had never studied, intuitive understanding of multidimensional engineering. Most troubling of all, several researchers had begun speaking words in a language that matched the ancient human records. "Sir," his assistant Kira called from across the laboratory, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. They're requesting your immediate presence at an emergency session." Veltar sighed, all 4 of his hearts heavy with dread. He had been expecting this call for weeks. The human technologies weren't the only things that had returned with the expedition fleet. They had brought something else as well, something that was beginning to make its presence known across Coalition space. The emergency session convened in the deepest levels of the Coalition government complex, in chambers designed to contain information too dangerous for general distribution. Representatives from every major species sat around the curved conference table, their alien faces united in expressions of confusion and fear. Admiral Nexera stood at the center of the room, her chitinous shell-bearing scars that hadn't been there before the Sol expedition. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that reminded everyone present of the ghostly humans they had encountered. "We have a problem," she began without preamble. "The human technologies we brought back aren't just tools. They're changing us." The statement sent ripples of alarm through the assembled delegates. Several demanded immediate explanations while others began questioning whether the expedition should have been attempted at all. "Show them," Admiral Nexara said to Dr. Veltar. Veltar activated his portable display unit and shared the data he had been collecting. Brain scans showing unusual neural activity in expedition members. Recordings of Coalition citizens speaking in languages they had never learned. Most disturbing of all, security footage of researchers solving complex problems by methods they couldn't explain afterward. "The human consciousness," Veltar explained, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, "exists in spaces between normal reality. When we interfaced with their technologies, when we absorbed their knowledge, we created connections to those spaces. We're beginning to think like they thought, to see reality the way they saw it." "Are you saying we're being possessed?" demanded Senator Krellnox, his synthetic voice crackling with static that might have been fear. "Not possessed, enhanced. The humans aren't taking control of our minds. They're teaching us to use parts of our minds we never knew existed. The problem is that this enhancement is happening whether we want it or not." Dr. Zifani's crystalline form pulsed with agitated light patterns. "I've been experiencing the same phenomena. Mathematical concepts that should be impossible suddenly make perfect sense. I solved a quantum dynamics problem yesterday using methods that shouldn't work, but the results were flawless." "And it's not just the scientists," added Commander Telvar. "Military personnel who were part of the expedition are reporting tactical insights that seem to come from nowhere. They're developing strategies for fighting enemies that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The implications hung in the air like a poison cloud. The Coalition had spent thousands of years developing their current understanding of science, warfare, and reality itself. Now, in a matter of months, that understanding was being rewritten by the ghostly influence of an extinct species. "There's more," Admiral Nexara continued. "Long-range sensors are detecting anomalies in the regions surrounding former human space. The monitoring stations we left near Sol system are reporting fluctuations in the containment structures." She activated the room's main display, showing real-time feeds from the sensor networks around the twisted remains of humanity's home system. The massive geometric structures that formed the Silence's prison were pulsing with irregular rhythms, their energy outputs fluctuating in patterns that suggested something was testing the barriers from within. "How long before containment fails?" asked Defense Minister Yargoth, his tentacles writhing with barely controlled panic. "Unknown. The humans' mathematics suggest the seal should hold for centuries, But the recent fluctuations indicate accelerated degradation. Something is causing the prison to weaken faster than expected. Something like what? Veltar cleared his throat, drawing attention to data he wished he didn't have to share. Like us, our presence in Sol system, our interaction with the archive, our absorption of human knowledge. We may have inadvertently weakened the seal by establishing connections to the same multidimensional spaces where the humans exist. The conference chamber erupted in angry voices. Accusations flew between different species. Blame was assigned and reassigned, and several delegates demanded immediate termination of all research into human technologies. Through the chaos, a new voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. They're not wrong to be afraid. Sarah Chen materialized in the center of the chamber, her translucent form causing several delegates to reach for weapons that would have been useless against her. She looked different than she had in the archive, more solid, more present in their reality. "How are you here?" Admiral Nixera demanded. "We're light years from Sol system." "Distance means nothing when you exist outside of normal spacetime," Sarah replied. "I'm here because you've created a connection, a bridge between your reality and ours. Every coalition citizen who has been touched by our knowledge has become an anchor point that allows us to manifest in your dimension. Are you invading us?" Senator Krellnox's voice carried battle algorithms at the edge of activation. "We're preparing you. The seal is failing faster than we calculated, not because of your presence in Sol system, but because the Silence has learned new methods of attack. It's been studying our prison for 50,000 years, finding weaknesses we never anticipated." Sarah gestured, and the chamber's displays filled with images that hurt to look at directly, the Silence in all its terrible non-existence pressing against barriers of crystallized human will. But now it wasn't just testing the boundaries randomly, it was probing systematically, using what looked disturbingly like intelligence. "It's learning," Dr. Zafani observed, her crystalline matrix flickering with realization. "The entity is becoming more sophisticated. Yes, and worse, it's found ways to influence reality from within its prison. The changes your people are experiencing aren't just from contact with our technologies. The Silence is using your enhanced cognitive abilities as windows into your dimension, trying to understand how to break free into your reality." The admission struck the chamber like a physical blow. Not only were coalition citizens being changed by human influence, but they were potentially being used as beacons by the very entity humanity had died to contain. "What do we do?" Admiral Nixara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You face the same choice we faced 50,000 years ago," Sarah replied, "but with advantages we didn't have. You know what's coming. You have our accumulated knowledge. Most importantly, you have time to prepare properly." "How much time? At current rates of seal degradation?" "Perhaps 50 years. Maybe less if the Silence discovers more efficient methods of weakening the barriers." 50 years. In galactic terms, it was barely a heartbeat. Certainly not enough time to evacuate 12,000 worlds or develop completely new technologies for fighting multidimensional horrors. "There is another option," Sarah continued, her form beginning to flicker as maintaining presence in their reality required increasing effort. "The enhanced individuals among your people aren't just being influenced by the Silence. They're developing capabilities that could reinforce the seal instead of weakening it. With proper training, they could become bridges between dimensions, able to exist in the spaces where the prison is located." "Like you did," Veltar said, understanding flooding through his enhanced consciousness. "You want us to join your vigil. I want you to have the choice we never did. The seal was built from human consciousness because we were the only species available when the crisis came. But human consciousness, no matter how expanded, is still fundamentally limited. A prison built from multiple species, multiple ways of thinking, multiple approaches to existence, would be far stronger than what we created alone." The implications were staggering. Sarah wasn't asking them to replace humanity as the Silence's guards. She was asking them to join in creating a completely new kind of prison, one that could contain the entity permanently rather than just delaying its escape. "What would that mean for our civilizations?" asked Defense Minister Yargoth. "It would mean transformation beyond anything you've imagined. Those who choose to join the vigil would exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, able to perceive reality from perspectives no single species could achieve alone. You would become something new, something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. And those who don't choose it? would continue to exist normally, protected by those who did. The prison wouldn't require your entire populations, just enough volunteers to create a stable multi-dimensional matrix. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 individuals would be needed. Admiral Nexera looked around the chamber, seeing the same mixture of terror and awe on every face. They were being offered godhood and damnation simultaneously, the chance to become something greater than they had ever imagined, and the responsibility to guard against something worse than extinction. "How do we decide something like this?" she asked. "The same way we did," Sarah replied, her form fading as the connection became harder to maintain. "You gather your wisest minds, your bravest souls, your most compassionate hearts. You look at what's at stake. And then you choose based on what you can live with and what you can't live without." As Sarah's presence faded completely, her final words echoed in the chamber. "The enhanced individuals among you are already becoming what you'll need them to be. The real question is whether you'll guide that transformation or let it happen randomly. Either way, change is coming. The only choice is whether you'll master it or be mastered by it." The conference chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the quiet breathing of a dozen different species all facing the same impossible decision. Outside, across Coalition space, individuals touched by human knowledge continued to change, their minds expanding into dimensions they couldn't name, their consciousness beginning to brush against spaces where ancient horrors tested cosmic prisons. The silence pressed against its barriers with renewed purpose, sensing opportunity in the new connections spreading through galactic civilization. And in response, 10 billion human souls pushed back, their will reinforced by growing numbers of coalition minds that were learning to think beyond the limitations of single-dimensional existence. The final choice was coming. The universe would soon discover whether 50,000 years of human sacrifice had been enough to prepare the galaxy for what came next, or whether even the combined will of multiple species would prove insufficient against the hunger of absolute nothingness. In the depths of space, monitoring stations continued their silent vigil, recording fluctuations that suggested time was running shorter than anyone had dared to fear. The crisis came without warning, as such things always do. Dr. Veltar was in his laboratory when every human artifact on 12,000 worlds began screaming in unison. Not with sound, for most of the devices produced no acoustic waves, but with a psychic shriek that penetrated the minds of every enhanced individual across Coalition space. The seal was breaking. Within hours, emergency broadcasts flooded the galactic communication networks. The monitoring stations around Sol system transmitted images of the containment structures buckling, their perfect geometric forms distorting as something pressed against them from within. Space itself was tearing around the prison, reality bleeding at the edges where the silence tested its bonds. But this wasn't the slow degradation they had expected. This was rapid, purposeful, coordinated. The entity had learned to manipulate the multidimensional connections created by coalition contact with human technology, using those bridges to accelerate the breakdown of its confinement. Admiral Nexara stood in the coalition's primary command center, watching her civilization face extinction in real time. Around her, representatives from every member species worked frantically to coordinate a response to something they barely understood. "Status report," she ordered, though she feared the answer. "Containment failure estimated at 15% and climbing," reported Science Commander Telvar, his tentacles dancing across holographic displays. "At current rates of degradation, total seal collapse in approximately 18 hours. 18 hours. Not the 50 years they had hoped for, not even the reduced time frame Sarah Chen had warned them about. The silence had found a way to turn the Coalition's own enhanced individuals into tools for its escape. "Communications from the enhanced coordinators across all worlds," announced the signals officer. "They're reporting the same phenomena everywhere. Individuals with human knowledge are experiencing involuntary consciousness expansion. They're being pulled into multidimensional space whether they want to go or not." Veltar felt the truth of that statement in his own mind. Even as he tried to focus on the crisis, part of his awareness was being drawn into spaces that existed between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the gaps in reality where impossible things dwelled. And in those spaces, he could feel them, silence pressing closer, using his own enhanced consciousness as a pathway toward freedom. "Sir," called another technician, We're receiving transmissions from the Sol System archive. The human consciousnesses are requesting immediate conference. Put them through. Sarah Chen materialized in the command center, but she was no longer the composed figure they had met before. Her form flickered wildly between human shape and something far more abstract, as if the effort of maintaining coherence was becoming impossible. "The seal is failing faster than we can repair it," she said without preamble. "The silence is using your people's enhanced minds to create resonance cascades in the prison structure. Every coalition individual who experiences consciousness expansion weakens our barriers further. Then we'll stop the expansion process," Admiral Nexara replied. "We'll suppress the enhancements, cut off contact with your technologies." "It's too late for that. The connections are already established. The enhanced individuals can't return to normal consciousness any more than we can return to normal life. The only way to prevent them from becoming tools of the silence is to complete their transformation." "Complete it how?" "Join us in the vigil. Not as replacement guards, but as partners in a new kind of prison. Use the enhanced individuals to create a multi-dimensional matrix that incorporates coalition consciousness, along with human will. Together, we can build something stronger than what we created alone." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah wasn't asking for volunteers anymore. She was asking them to sacrifice thousands of their people immediately to prevent the destruction of everything. "How many?" asked Defense Minister Yargoth. "Everyone who's been enhanced. Every coalition citizen whose consciousness has been expanded by contact with our knowledge. They're already partway into the spaces where we exist. The choice now is whether they complete that journey with purpose or get torn apart by dimensional forces they can't control." The number was staggering. Across coalition space, nearly 10 million individuals had been affected by human technologies. Scientists, engineers, artists, philosophers, soldiers, civilians. All of them now faced a choice between transcendent sacrifice and painful dissolution. "And if they refuse?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then they die anyway when the dimensional stress tears their enhanced minds apart. But worse, their destruction will create weak points in reality that the silence can exploit. Their deaths will become doorways for our enemy." Admiral Nexara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible decision. Around her, the command center bustled with activity as her people tried to find alternatives that didn't exist, solutions that couldn't work, miracles that wouldn't come. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There is," said a new voice. Another figure materialized beside Sarah, but this one was different. It appeared to be human, but its form contained traces of other species as well. When it moved, shadows of insectoid limbs, crystalline matrices, and energy patterns flickered around its edges. "I am what was once called Dr. Marcus Webb of the Human Research Collective," the figure explained. "But I am also what remains of the Kethali philosopher Mordun, the Zephyrian engineer Veltara, and 17 other individuals from species that joined us during the final war. We became something new, something that combines the best of all our ways of thinking. A hybrid consciousness," Dr. Zefani breathed, her crystalline form pulsing with recognition. "You merged multiple species into a single entity. We became what was necessary to hold the line, and we're offering the same transformation to your enhanced individuals. Not absorption into human consciousness, but fusion into something unprecedented. A truly galactic mind that can perceive reality from every possible angle." The displays around the command center changed, showing mathematical models that hurt to look at directly. The hybrid consciousness was proposing something that had never been attempted before: the creation of a multi-dimensional entity built from the willing merger of thousands of enhanced individuals from dozens of different species. "It would be stronger than our current prison," Sarah added, her form stabilizing as the hybrid entity helped maintain her coherence. "More flexible, more creative, more capable of adapting to the silence's attacks. But it would also be something entirely new. We don't know what such a consciousness would become over time." "We know what it won't become," the hybrid replied. "It won't become extinct. It won't become forgotten. and it won't fail in its duty to protect the galaxy. Across Coalition space, the enhanced individuals were already making their choice. Veltar felt it happening in his own mind, the expansion of consciousness accelerating beyond his control. But instead of fear, he felt something he hadn't expected: anticipation. The human knowledge flowing through his enhanced awareness wasn't just teaching him new facts. It was showing him new ways to think, new approaches to existence, new methods of being that transcended the limitations of single-species consciousness. And beneath it all, he could sense other minds awakening to the same realization. "The process is already beginning," he announced to the command center. "Enhanced individuals across the galaxy are entering spontaneous merger states. They're joining together into collective matrices. Can we stop it?" Admiral Nexara asked. "Do we want to?" Veltar replied. "Admiral, I can feel what they're becoming. It's not death. It's transformation into something greater than any of us imagined possible." The command center's displays filled with reports from across Coalition space. Enhanced individuals were gathering in designated areas, their consciousness expanding beyond individual boundaries. But instead of chaos, there was purpose. Instead of destruction, there was creation. They were building something. "Containment failure at 28%, reported Telvar. "But the rate of degradation is slowing. The new consciousness matrices are beginning to reinforce the prison structure." On the main display, the monitoring stations around Sol system showed the containment structures beginning to stabilize. The perfect geometric forms were changing, becoming more complex, more organic, more alive. Human consciousness was being joined by coalition minds, creating patterns that had never existed before. "It's working," Sarah Chen said, her form becoming more solid as the reinforcements took hold. "The hybrid matrices are adapting to weaknesses in the original seal, creating new barriers that the silence can't manipulate as easily." But even as the immediate crisis passed, everyone in the command center understood that this was just the beginning. The enhanced individuals weren't just joining the vigil temporarily. They were becoming something that would exist for as long as the universe required guardians. "What about the rest of us?" asked Defense Minister Yargoth. "Those of us who weren't enhanced, who remained purely biological?" "You continue to live," the hybrid consciousness replied, its voice now carrying harmonics from dozens of different species. "You continue to grow, to explore, to create, to love. But you do so under the protection of those who chose to become something else. For how long? For as long as you need us to. The vigil doesn't end with the current crisis. There will always be cosmic threats, always be dangers that require multidimensional guardians. We've become the universe's immune system, the force that stands between normal existence and the dark spaces between realities." Admiral Nexara looked around the command center, seeing the same mixture of grief and awe on every face. They had lost nearly 10 million citizens to an impossible transformation, but they had also gained something unprecedented: permanent guardians who combined the best qualities of every species in the galaxy. "Containment failure has stopped at 31%, Telvar reported. "The hybrid matrices are not just reinforcing the existing prison structure. They're rebuilding it entirely, creating something more sophisticated than what the humans originally constructed." The displays showed the truth of that statement. Around Sol system, the geometric containment structures were dissolving and reforming, becoming vast crystalline networks that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And within those networks, the combined consciousness of humans and coalition species worked together to maintain barriers that the silence could never break. "The new prison isn't just stronger," Sarah explained, her own form beginning to merge with the growing hybrid consciousness. "It's adaptive. It learns from the silence's attacks and develops countermeasures. It grows stronger with each attempt to break it. And it's not just a prison anymore," added the hybrid entity. "It's a training ground. Future enhanced individuals from new species can join us, adding their perspectives to the collective. The vigil becomes a growing community rather than a solitary sacrifice." As the immediate crisis passed, reports began flowing in from across the galaxy. The transformation hadn't been limited to coalition space. Enhanced individuals from species they had never contacted, worlds they had never visited, civilizations that had developed their own responses to human artifacts, were all joining the growing collective consciousness. The vigil was becoming truly galactic in scope. "How many now?" Admiral Nexara asked. Approximately 50 million enhanced individuals from over 300 species, the hybrid replied. And the number continues to grow as more civilizations discover human artifacts and undergo their own enhancement processes. Veltar felt his individual consciousness fading into something larger, but instead of loss, he experienced completion. His scientific curiosity merged with human determination, Krilk's mathematical precision, Zephyrian engineering creativity, and dozens of other perspectives he couldn't have imagined alone. The trail continues, he said with his final individual words. The monuments we followed weren't just teaching tools. They were recruitment stations preparing the galaxy for this moment. Every species that follows them will face the same choice we faced. And most will make the same choice we made, the hybrid consciousness added, its voice now carrying the combined will of millions. Because courage is contagious, because hope spreads faster than fear, because the universe creates heroes when it needs them most. In the depths of its multidimensional prison, the silence pressed against barriers that now incorporated the will of hundreds of species. For the first time in 50,000 years, its attacks were not just contained but actively repelled. The prison wasn't just holding, it was growing stronger, and in response, the hybrid consciousness spread its awareness across the galaxy, reaching out to other species, other worlds, other civilizations, ready to take the next step in their evolution. The vigil had become something the humans never imagined. Not a burden carried by the few, but a shared responsibility embraced by many. The monuments continued broadcasting their messages across the void, but now they carried a new addendum. A promise that those who answered the call would not face the darkness alone. That courage, once awakened, could transform the universe itself. The shadows had become light, and the light was spreading to every corner of existence. Eons after Earth's fall, one shadowed message had indeed stretched across the heavens. But what it created was not shadow at all. It was the dawn of something unprecedented. A truly cosmic civilization built on the foundation of willing sacrifice and shared hope. The universe had found its guardians, and they would never be alone again.